Hello, my name is Jerome and welcome to my RC construction station. Today I'm going to give a review of the K961 excavator transmitter settings. I've had quite a few people contact me after accidentally resetting their transmitters and could no longer operate their excavators. So I'm just going to step through all the screens so that if this happens to you, you will have an image of what all the screens look like. And I will tell you if I made custom settings in some of the screens that may not apply to you. So initially, this is what it's going to look like when you turn on your transmitter. The first thing you have to do before anything is probably bind your transmitter to your excavator, because that binding may have been lost. So in order to do that, you want to go to your receiver. And once in the receiver, you will go here to bind settings. When you do this, if you open the lid where the battery goes on your excavator, you'll see a little connector sticking up out of that lid in the bay. You have to take the little jumper wire that came with your excavator to short the two pins of that plug, which you can just plug it in with the excavator turned off. At that point, you'll go in here to bind settings and you'll click bind start. Once you hit start here, you'll see this guy looking and waiting for binding. At this point, press the power to turn your excavator on with the jumper wire in place. Once they bind together, you want to turn your excavator off. I don't have my excavator with me, I'm just showing you the screens. So I'll exit that. Now you're bound together, you can press the button on your excavator and you'll probably see that it's connected to your transmitter. So from here, let me show you the rest of the receiver settings. Again, we're in the receiver. We went through binding, fail safe. I'll show it to you, but I don't set this up. Mine is set to none. Sensor, I haven't messed with this ever. Sensor calibration, I don't think I have a sensor connected, so there's no calibration. GPS setting, you can ignore that. iBus setting, I think you have to do. Nope, no iBus setting. Range test, you don't have to do. RF settings, no, you don't have to do anything for that either. Alright, so that should have you good with the receiver settings so that you can move forward to set up your transmitter. Once you click on transmitter, you want to go to model. And when you hit model select, here I named mine the K961. You are able to label this whatever you want to, but K961 probably will not be in there. So you'll just select the first one, which is like this, like these. You can do as many as you want. Well, I think it only goes to 22 to 20. But this is where you'll select your model. Here's where you name your model. Once you do the selection, and what you're actually selecting is the number 1 next to this. So everything you program in the transmitter will be in this first setting, or whichever one you choose, and you give it a name to know which equipment you're going to do. Once you select that, you give it a name, you go into this screen, and as you type in here, it pops up in the bottom, and then you will have named your excavator. You can call it anything you want. Select the type, just gives you a symbol. I chose excavator. There are other things in here, and this is not really tied to anything other than just giving you a symbol so you can visually see what you're selecting. Model copy. If I had 2 excavators, once I program one, I could click this model copy and paste it in another selection, and instead of doing all of the settings manually. Model reset wipes it out, which you probably know, which is why you're watching this video. Stick mode. The standard position of the sticks is M2 to control your boom, your stick, and your bucket, and the rotation. All of these things, just make sure you're on M2 and it'll be set up the way it came from the factory. Calibration, I don't know. You don't have to worry about that. Unless your sticks aren't centered. If they're not centered, you'll have to do this to calibrate your sticks so they will know where center is at. Cancel, yes. System setting. This is where your language is at. Ironically, when I received my transmitter, everything was in Chinese, and I couldn't even get it going because I didn't know what to click. And I don't remember how. I think I looked at a YouTube video to find out how to put this in English so that I could even get started. But this for your transmitter is every time you hear this little beep, this is doing, it's vibrating also. You can change the volume, alarm time. My transmitter goes for 10 minutes, then it beeps and shuts off. This gives a vibration when the alarm happens, and just a lot of stuff. AA batteries, LED color, which I have blue here, but you have a choice. Don't want to shake the camera. The brightness, and so on and so forth. Auto shut off at 10 minutes. So that's not important to get you going, but I want to go through all the screens. Model set. Conditions. I don't think I have any conditions set. I haven't created any. Rate curve. This is curves you can put in to make your bucket move smoother. Sometimes I use this, sometimes I don't. But it's not important to get your excavator going if you reset the transmitter. By default, this exponent is at 0 and rate is at 100, and that's for all the channels. Throttle hold, this is for an airplane. I don't set that. And track mix, I don't have this set also. Sometimes on excavators, people will use one of their gimbals to run both of the tracks instead of using the wheels at the top of the transmitter. Going out of that screen, here comes the major screen. Monitor, it just shows you what is what. Oops. Notice channel 2 goes with 5, 1 is with 5, and 3 is with 5. And 5 is the pump. If you don't see this 5 moving when you move your gimbals, then you definitely have to set the mix up so the pump turns on when you move the gimbal. Reverse. This is where my switches are positioned. Make sure F5 is your pump. If you hear your pump running and nothing moves, you may try switching 5 to see if maybe your pump was running backwards. But I have all these switches on, and these are the positions with number 2 and number 7 reversed. Endpoints, this is the amount of output you have on each of your channels. Channel 2 I have slowed down a little bit so that the arm does not raise or lower too fast. But in general, all of these will start out being set to 100. One thing I do want to mention is here where I have 27 for sub trim. For some reason, after 5 or 6 months of playing with my excavator, the top turntable would just turn on its own. And so here is where I set the sub trim, and I just kept cranking it down till it stopped spinning. It's stable, and that's just what the number happened to be. Also, for channel 5, I have a -8 in here because one day the pump was slowly like trying to turn. I could hear a noise, so I set this sub trim, and that took care of the problem. I guess things get broken in, worn out, I don't know, for whatever reason. But basically, when you start, everything's gonna be 100, 100, and 0. Unless you have things moving that you don't want to move. Then you set a sub trim. Oh, that was endpoints. Channel speed, these will all be 0 initially. For channel 4, which is my turntable, I put a 1 second setting in here, and the reason I did that is when I turn my turntable, it jerks to move and jerks to stop. When I put this 1 second delay in, it starts off smooth and it stops smoothly. So it takes a second to get to full speed, and it takes a second to drop down back to no speed. And that's a lot less wear and tear on the excavator, and it's much easier for me to use it. And that's the only setting I have in here. Auxiliary channels, they will start with channel 5. And this is, channel 5 is your pump. When I do an oil change and my excavator has no oil in it, and I'm starting to refill the oil reservoir, I usually take this and I will connect it to a switch, say switch A, so that when I click switch A, the pump turns on and stays on as long as the switch is in the on position. This way, when I fill up the reservoir with hydraulic fluid, it makes sure to push it through consistently and reduces the chance of getting air in the system. And once I'm finished and the reservoir is filled up and everything's working, I always go back and set channel 5 to none. But channel 6 and 7, VRD and VRC, are the wheels at the top to run the tracks. And then you have various other switches which I have connected to a sound system and lights and things of that nature. If you're only seeing 8 channels, I will show you how to turn on 9, 10, 11, and 12, because your receiver does have 12 channels. And actually, I've already made a video on how to add the extra channels. I'll put them as a link that you can click on at the end of this video in order to see how to add additional channels. Trims. Basically, this is how my trims were when I purchased it. I showed you under another screen how you can set trim there. It's much easier to do it there than to do it here. But if you wanted to do it here, which I made a video on that before I discovered the easier way, which I showed you earlier, you have to click this, and the channel for wherever you want the change to happen, you have to change it here and do that on all of these. Say if I wanted to do channel 1, you have to click this to channel 1. And in order to change these, let me zoom out. In order to change these settings, you use these 2 buttons here. They either go up and down or side to side. So for instance, if I move this one to the left, this changed from a 5 to a 4, then to a 3. If you move it the other direction, if you keep going, it'll go negative. But you will notice as you change this, it will also cause things to move if they weren't moving, or if you're having unwanted movement, you can do this to get rid of that. When I move the top one, this T1 moves. And the same thing when I move this one, it does the bottom too. Then you have your mixes. You want to have mix 1, 2, and 3 on. This is for your stick, boom, and bucket. Number 1, I believe, is for your bucket. These are the settings. Let me zoom back in. You want to make sure it's set to on. Switch is on none. This is for channel 1, is the master, which is the bucket. Channel 5 is the pump. And then over here you got negative 100 and 100. Which is strange to me because I always thought the positive was at the top. But they need to be the opposite. And you'll see if I move the gimbal for the bucket, the master goes to the right, which is positive, and the slave always goes in the negative direction, regardless of how the gimbal is moved, because you want the pump always to turn in one direction. Then you exit out of this, you go to mix 2, same thing. Make sure it's turned on. No switch at the top is connected. Channel 2, which is to make the boom go up and down, is the master. Channel 5 is the slave, which is the pump. Set this to negative 100, reverse positive 100. And as I move the gimbal, again, going up and going down. So the top one, I can move the boom up or down. The bottom is the slave. It's always going in that direction. And the reason that the master and slave aren't equal as far as the graph goes is because I have a rate setting done to put a curve in it to make it move smoother. So the master is not putting out 100%. I have it less, maybe about 89%. In a different screen where I set the rate curve. And 3 is the same thing, except difference here. 3 is for the stick, the left hand gimbal, and when I move it, I can move it forward or back, and the slave, which is the pump, always goes in one direction. And these are all the settings that will get your excavator going again. Going back as far as only having 8 channels that show up on your transmitter, if you wanted to add the additional 4 channels, because you have 4 in the receiver, you can scroll over to receiver and then scroll to iBus settings. And here is a list of all your channels. And when you look in here, you'll only have 8, and channel 9, 10, 11, and 12, you'll be able to enable them so that all your channels are active on your receiver. So that's the full scope of all the settings for your K961 excavator transmitter. in case you accidentally wipe it out. This should definitely get you going as long as you do the binding procedure in the beginning. And with that, I'll let you go. That's all I got for today. If you like what you saw, click like. If you got any questions, ask me in the comment. Later.